Purnon's dry moat, flanking the chateau on 3 sides, often sparks curiosity. With the restoration of the wall on the western side in full swing, let's unlock the moat's secrets. Why did the architect surround the chateau on 3 sides with a dry moat? Was it intended to have water in it? Was it an elaborate security measure? Or did it serve some other purpose?
So we're down here in the dry moat, and if we look around and we consider the layout of the chateau, we can answer those questions pretty easily. Firstly, there's no way that this dry moat was ever intended to have water in it. If we look around, we can see there are doors, there are windows, there's a series of cellars that have been built into the wall of the dry moat, and it's accessed by 2 tunnels. So clearly no one ever imagined that this space would be filled with water. So what about the question of security? Is the dry moat here to make the chateau more secure? Now, at one level, it does play a bit of a role in protecting the chateau from intruders. But on the northern side, the windows on the ground floor can be accessed from ground level. So really, this dry moat was not designed principally as a security measure. To understand the real reason for the existence of the dry moat, we need to cast our minds back to the end of the 18th century when the chateau was first constructed and understand how life would have worked here at the chateau. The noble family that constructed Purnon would have employed an army of staff to cater to their every need, and the focus of the activity of those staff would have been here in the basement. The people who cut wood and hauled it in for storage would have stocked it here in the basement for the 23 fireplaces that are spread throughout the chateau. The huge basement kitchen here would have had a staff of cooks and assistants preparing the meals, stocking all of the food. The Marquis's wine cellar, based here in the chateau's basement. There would have been people coming and going throughout the day. And so separating them and their access to the chateau from the noble family and their guests who would have entered the chateau from the ground floor through the main entrances would have been a very important part of keeping life separate. A life for the domestic staff focused here in the basement, completely separate, in some ways invisible from the noble family and their guests accessing the chateau from the ground floor. And so that's the reason for the dry moat here at Château de Purnon. It acted to separate the social classes and to make sure that the servants working here in the basement crossed paths as rarely as possible with the noble family and their guests.
Shortly after arriving at Purnon, we realised that the base of the dry moat was much higher than when the chateau was first built. We were puzzled as to why the tunnels were so low. The uneven soil in the dry moat surprised us. And when we dug in a couple of places, we made surprising discoveries. Including traces of a system of stone gutters that appeared to have surrounded the chateau. Was it just the passage of time, or had someone really added what appeared to be hundreds of tons of earth to Purnon's dry moat?
Well, to understand the reason for it, we need to go back to the end of the 19th century. Purnon had been purchased by a new family, and the chateau was tired and in need of a huge upgrade. And one of the decisions that the family took was to add guttering to the roofline of the chateau for the first time. Prior to that, rainwater fell off the chateau roof and tumbled here into the dry moat, where it was whisked away by this system of stone gutters. Now, whether this system ever worked really well, we can't be sure. But there was also a new development. Bathrooms had flushing toilets, and flushing toilets required a system of water evacuation far superior to the old system of chamber pots that had to be emptied by maids and servants. All of this meant water infrastructure had to be installed here in Purnon's dry moat, and we can see it here as our stonemasons have started to excavate all of the earth that was added at the end of the 19th century. We can see these systems, water harvesting systems that gathered the water in the gutters, took it through downpipes and stored it in huge water cisterns here in the dry moat. But they couldn't get the angles right to ensure a gravity-fed system. Some of it had to be placed at ground level, and that meant raising the level of the moat with tons and tons of earth that we now want to remove so that we can return the dry moat to its original level.
And with the work now underway to shift the mountains of earth, the team can finally begin the restoration of the dry moat wall on the western side of the chateau. First, they must dismantle the old failing wall.
And with all of this activity on the western dry moat wall, our stonemasons have been busy under the bridge. Let's go and have a look at what they've been up to.
Well, the return of the beautiful original 18th century Metz to this zone here underneath the Chateau Bridge really signifies the completion of the restoration work of our stonemasons in this area. So what have they done? Well, when we first arrived, this area here had a stone wall created to block this section off and really divide the two sides of the moat. There was a wooden door that sat in the stone wall. They had cemented in one of the windows that gave light and air into the entrance hall here under the bridge. So the first room that you come into when you entered the basement, they had actually blocked off the door here that entered into the basement from here. This was the main entrance for the domestic staff who were coming and going in and out of the moat to access the basement. So our stonemasons have removed that wall, they have reopened the window, they have restored all the stonework around the main entrance here, around the doorway. Our carpenters have crafted a new door, and this is the first time since we've been here that now the main entrance to the basement is now usable. They have restored all the stonework in this zone. They have restored the render, this really beautiful hand-flicked rustic render with the colour perfectly matched the original 18th century colour. That challenge of how could they find the right colour, and then ended up finding it by using the sand that came from the forest in front of the chateau. And now they have restored the floor here by relaying the original 18th century Metz. These Metz were actually reclaimed from another area of the chateau, so they are original to the chateau. And I hear you asking, why are there Metz on one side and stone on the other side? Well, we asked our architect this the other day, and his response was, sometimes there are things that we we just do not understand, but it's important that we return them to the way that they were in the 18th century. But his theory is that potentially there was a pathway on this section and not here. You can see there is remnants of the original stonework that has been uncovered as we've been removing all the excess dirt here. And so that's a hypothesis, but it's really wonderful to have this zone nearly finished. There's just one task left to do, and that is for our carpenters to return the door to this entrance to the small room that sits under the bridge. This small room, we have covered the purpose of it recently in one of our members bonus videos. So if you're intrigued by that, I'll pop a link in the description below. But all the stonework for the doorway has been restored, so it's just putting the door in place, and then this entire zone will be completed. So another milestone reached in the restoration of Purnon's bridge and dry moat. Well, I think one of the really interesting things about the journey to restore the dry moat is it actually reflects two of our aspects of our journey here to restore the chateau. And one of those is the uncovering of mysteries or the answering of questions or all those unknowns when we first arrived. And we received a lot of questions last week about the moat, and so we hope that we've addressed those for you. And the second really is about returning everything to how it was in the 18th century, how Purnon's architect designed the chateau to be, and the moat is a really good area where we see that happening as well.
No, absolutely, and I think it really underscores the genius that sits behind the original design of the chateau. And over the centuries, when changes were made, those changes often had unanticipated knock-on effects that then necessitated further changes, and they started to get away from the genius of the original design of the chateau. And so it really is fantastic to see it coming back to its original 18th century splendour, not just because aesthetically it looks fantastic, but it just means that the property breathes better, water circulates better, the whole place operates the way it was originally designed to, and I think that's really one of the great aspects of returning as much as we can the chateau to its original 18th century form. Now, we've got some wonderful milestones coming up.
Yes, we do.
Next week you will see the laying of the 47,000th and final slate tile on Purnon's roof, all things going to plan, so please stay tuned for that. We'll then see gradually the scaffolding coming down off the western facade, and we hope in a few weeks' time the last piece of scaffolding coming down. You're going to see the last bits of masonry work, of stone masonry work that has to be done for the restoration of the exterior of the chateau. You're going to see these two magnificent lions return. Now that project is running a little bit behind schedule, so bear with us on that. Stay tuned and we'll keep you up to date with that project. And inside the chateau, one of the great milestones is going to be the conclusion of the billiard room and the restoration of the billiard table that was designed for it. One of, if not the oldest billiard table in France today. So please stay tuned, because in the months ahead we're going to share each step of these wonderful milestones with you.
And if all of that is not enough for you and you want more from here at Château de Purnon, join us over on Patreon or as a YouTube member, plus Patreon access, where we post a bonus weekly video. And this week Tim takes takes you on a tour of a ruined building discovered in our park,
And that's not the chateau.
or any of the other dozen plus outbuildings. Otherwise, as always, we post frequent updates on all our social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, or just hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and we will keep you updated here. See you next week.